we did have it was an experiment, but I did record and live stream the worship last night. So
I was able to listen to part of it, but with my hearing aids on the blink, I really didn't get too much out of it, so I didn't listen to all of it.
it was a little. I just watched part of it. It was a little hard to hear some of it.
Yeah, anytime from the fellowship hall, you can't hardly hear what's going on.
See, when we live stream from the sanctuary, the sound board is wired directly into my computer.
Mhm.
So there's no chance you're gonna hear at least everything that's mic'd, you're gonna hear.
Yeah.
And then we have an ambient mic that picks up even if people say things in the congregation. It actually does a pretty good job picking them up. So you hear pretty much everything, even if people aren't mic'd on the sanctuary. In Hartman, it was all through my computer, and you know,
Yeah.
you get what you get. It wasn't too bad. I could understand.
Oh,
But I might move it to be a little closer to me. So, but yeah, it was an experiment. We had 7 views, and we had as many as 2 live people watching last night. So
right.
So that's good.
Okay.
It's a little. It sounds silly, but it's a little tricky because when we're hooked into we know how to do it when we're hooked into the system, because you have to pick cameras and stuff, and that way it's almost taking a step backwards. Okay, well, I'm not hooked into all these cords. How do I do it? But we are in the book of Hosea. We're in chapter 9. As I mentioned before, Hosea is the minor prophets are basically, we think, roughly in chronological order, which means Hosea is the first of the minor prophets, and it's probably 750 BC, which is at or near the beginning of the Assyrian conquest of the people, which so that's very, very early. If we remember, some of the later ones were all the way back in at the Babylonian exile, and even after that. So there's a couple hundred years difference, but this is very, very early. Hosea's there's a few other sort of interesting things with Hosea. Hosea's it seems like every chapter he says something about whoredom or sexual impurity, which is a big thing. But yet he starts off with his personal story about he married a prostitute intentionally. So I don't know, to convert her or what, but so I was looking at some of the stuff today, and there's similar sorts of language today. So that clearly was a big issue with Hosea. So chapter 9. Do not rejoice, O Israel. Do not exult as other nations do, for you have played the whore, departing from your God. You have loved a prostitute's pay. You have on all threshing floors. Threshing floor and wine vat shall not feed them, and the new wine shall fail them. They shall not remain in the land of the Lord. But Ephraim shall return to Egypt, and in Assyria they shall eat unclean food. They shall not pour drink offerings of wine to the Lord, and their sacrifices shall not please him. Such sacrifices shall be like mourner's bread. All who eat of it shall be defiled. For their bread shall be for their hunger only. It shall not come to the house of the Lord. What will you do on the day of the appointed festival, and on the day of the festival of the Lord? For even if they escape destruction, Egypt shall gather them, Memphis shall bury them, Nettle shall possess their precious things of silver, thorns shall be in their tents. The days of punishment have come, the days of recompense have come, Israel cries. The prophet is a fool, the man of the spirit is mad. Because of your great iniquity, your hostility is great. The prophet is a sentinel for my God over Ephraim, yet a fowler's snare is on all his ways, and hostility in the house of his God. They have deeply corrupted themselves as in the days of Gibeah. He will remember their iniquity, he will punish their sins. Like grapes in the wilderness, I found Israel. Like the first fruit on the fig tree in its first season, I saw your ancestors. But they came to Baal Peor and consecrated themselves to a thing of shame and became detestable like the thing they loved. Ephraim's glory shall fly away like a bird. No birth, no pregnancy, no conception. Even if they bring up children, I will bereave them until no one is left. Woe to them indeed when I depart from them. Once I saw Ephraim as a young palm planted in a lovely meadow, but now Ephraim must lead out his children for slaughter. Give them, O Lord, what will you give? Give them a miscarrying womb and dry breasts. Wow. Every evil of theirs began at Gilgal. There I came to hate them. Because of the wickedness of their deeds, I will drive them out of my house. I will love them no more. All their officials are rebels. Ephraim is stricken, their root is dried up. They shall bear no fruit. Even though they give birth, I will kill the cherished offspring of their womb. Because they have not listened to him, my God will reject them. They shall become wanderers among the nations. So as a reminder, the reference to Ephraim this is fairly new information for me. I remember discovering that the land where the chosen people, where the Jewish people are, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom are separated. And at the time of Jesus, the land in between is Samaria, but it was probably the chosen people at some point. Turns out it was the tribe of Ephraim.
Oh,
So the two tribes that survived, Judah and Israel, are separated by the tribe of Ephraim.
oh,
And when Jesus is traveling, almost 800 years later, he's going back and forth through foreign lands, right?
yeah.
So the historical thing here that's coming up is that the tribe of Ephraim sort of allied with the Assyrians were coming to destroy the rest of them. So when you say Ephraim is not a person, it's Ephraim is cursed because they sided with the enemy.
Oh,
There's some also here about false prophets, and false gods, idols and stuff like that too. But a lot of the Ephraim comments have to do with that tribe of Israel. At least it existed at the time of Hosea, but by the time of Jesus, it's not there anymore.
yeah.
So,
Okay. Question, verse 13 now.
mhm.
So that's not referring to child sacrifices to idols, is it? We're just talking about being overrun by other nations.
I think that's what it is. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
The two verses before that, no birth, no pregnancy, no conception. I will bereave them until no one is left. I think it's more about the sort of the curse that you see in other books about you won't have any offspring, right?
Okay.
So there's a few sort of place names. The days of Gibeah in verse 9. It says it probably refers to the ancient atrocity perpetrated against the Levites' concubine and recorded in Judges. Baal Peor. Anytime you see Baal, it's an idol of another god.
Yeah.
And so this is actually a derogatory name for Baal, which is interesting. Every evil of theirs that began at Gilgal in verse 15. Kingship for Israel was inaugurated at Gilgal. Israel's kings were responsible for religious apostasy and political instability. That's interesting. The time of, but again, I keep referring, the time of Jesus, early on, the line of kings was largely aligned with the people's best interest, but more and more over thousands of years, it went away so much so that by the time Jesus is around, the kings, the Herods, are only in it for power and money, and have no connection with the temple, really. It's very much a monarchy that's only that they don't have power, but they also have great wealth, and they don't. So it got more and more over thousands of years to be less about actually leading the people and more about privilege.
When I read in the Old Testament prophets, I can't help but think, how does this apply to us? We're really doomed.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's very hard to translate, right? If I had a passage from this to preach on, I'm not sure where I'd even begin.
Yeah.
I mean, other than sort of general, we should be morally good,
Yeah.
I don't know, the Ephraim stuff makes me think, that we need to work toward unity with other Christians in general, because I mean that's a way you could translate it for today.
Yeah.
That here you have one of the 12 tribes essentially going against two of the other tribes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, the house divided against itself cannot stand, right?
Yeah.
Um,
But I also can't help but trying to apply it to Ukraine and Putin and, the whole thing that's going on in our world today.
for sure. Yeah. Well, I wasn't planning on having this conversation, but
Yeah, I'm sorry.
no, it's fine. I'm the older I get, the more of a pacifist I get. I don't think most of the wars in my lifetime, when we look back at them, they weren't about what we thought they were about.
Yeah.
They were about putting money in people's pockets. That's not us.
Mm-hmm.
Even the Gulf Wars largely were that. If put this way, I've said this is one of the most mind-blowing things. Hopefully I don't think this is political, but the most of the conspirators in 9/11 were from Saudi Arabia. The money was from Saudi Arabia. Most of them were Saudi Arabian. Even Osama bin Laden was Saudi Arabian. And yes, they fled to Afghanistan and Pakistan, but Saudi Arabia saw no political, no war, no recourse for essentially funding 9/11.
Mm.
Because Saudi Arabia is home to our second largest air base, third largest air base, one of our top 3 anyway, in the world. You don't want to make a close ally where we have a major air base upset.
Yeah.
But so it's, so we made war against another nation that had very little to do with it. And it all had to do with lining people's pockets.
Yeah.
So I'm just more and more, I say most of the time there's no winners in war, obviously. And there's a whole lot of losers. I mean, even the Russian soldiers there's a report of a lot of the Russian soldiers trying to defect and distraught from what's going on because their own families don't believe them that they're invading Ukraine.
Yeah.
It's just a mess, anytime I used to think, in the idea of a just war, because there are people that are horrible people and you have to take care of them. But at the same time, most of the ways we do it aren't they don't end up being positive.
Well, I guess one of my big questions is, how do we pray about that?
I pray for peace all the time.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Yeah. Well, to pray for pieces, yeah, that covers it.
But I'm glad you said that, because it's sort of an underlying theme, but it is an important theme here in Hosea, that there's a war going on.
Mhm.
Assyria is invading the Holy Land, and like I said, every time we see Ephraim, it basically is saying, oh, by the way, one of these tribes of Israel has allied itself with the enemy that's invading and killing people. And apparently the invasion of Assyria at this point, and the Babylonian invasion, were very, very different. The Assyrians were much more brutal, would kill and rape and all that stuff, and didn't care about destroying things, while the Babylonians were just trying to assimilate and so killing everybody doesn't help them. And that's why you can't have an exile if you kill everybody.
Yeah, right.
Right. So the Babylonian exile, I'm not saying that was a good thing, but at least historically people say that the Assyrian invasion was a lot more brutal.
Yeah.
So the fact that you have this brutal enemy invading, and oh, by the way, one third of your nation is helping them, is just, you can imagine why the prophet and the people were so hurt by that, right? And that's war, right?
Yeah.
People have to choose sides sometimes. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to start again with chapter 10. Israel is a luxuriant vine that yields its fruit. The more his fruit increased, the more altars he built. As his country improved, he improved his pillars. Their heart is false, now they must bear their guilt. The Lord will break down their altars and destroy their pillars. For now they will say, we have no king, for we do not fear the Lord, and the king, what could he do for us? They utter mere words, with empty oaths they make covenants. So litigation springs up like poisonous weeds in the furrows of the field. The inhabitants of Samaria tremble for the calf of Bethaven. Its people shall mourn for it, and its idolatrous priests shall wail over its glory that has departed from it. The thing itself shall be carried to Assyria as tribute to the great king. Ephraim shall be put to shame, and Israel shall be ashamed of his idol. Samaria's king shall perish like a chip on the face of the waters. The high places of Avon, the sin of Israel, shall be destroyed. Thorn and thistle shall grow up on their altars. They shall say to the mountains, cover us, and to the hills, fall on us. Since the days of Gibeah you have sinned, O Israel. There they have continued. Shall not war overtake them in Gibeah? I will come against a wayward people to punish them. And nations shall be gathered against them when they are punished for their double iniquity. Ephraim was a trained heifer that loved to thresh, and I spared her fair neck. But I will make Ephraim break the ground. Judah must plow, Jacob must harrow for himself. Sow for yourselves righteousness, reap steadfast love. Break up your fallow ground. For it is time to seek the Lord, that he may come and rain righteousness upon you. You have plowed wickedness, you have reaped injustice, you have eaten the fruit of lies, because you have trusted in your power and in the multitude of your warriors. Therefore the tumults of war shall rise against your people, and all your fortresses shall be destroyed. As Shalman destroyed Beth Arbel on the day of battle, when mothers were dashed in pieces with their children. Thus it shall be done to you, O Bethel, because of your great wickedness. At dawn the king of Israel shall be utterly cut off. So references to Israel is references to the northern kingdom. It's not just the Ephraim that's been the bad one. what was the other thing I caught in there? There's references to Samaria here, which I think is that same region in between Israel and Judah. That first little stanza makes me think, it seemed like one of the few positives in this whole book. Like, oh look, Israel is a luxuriant vine that yields its fruit. Look, and then at the very end it says, oh, but it's false and it's all going to be destroyed. So it feels like they've sort of, relished their gains. They sort of maybe over. How do I put this? They've sort of sat on wealth and not actually. It's how it feels, sat on their positives, and not really used it. I'm getting messages from other people. Don't they know I'm in a Bible study?
Apparently not.
Do we know how long a time frame all of this took? What, from one period to the next?
This book was written over a fairly short period of time.
Okay.
So probably as much as 20 years, but maybe maybe more. Somewhere between 750 and 720, so maybe as much as 30 years, which really in the grand scheme of things isn't that long.
So this was one generation basically involved in all this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And likely the same prophet. Like, I mentioned some of the other prophets were written over such a huge expanse of time that they were probably multiple people writing.
Yeah.
It was a short enough time and has a similar sort of style of writing that it's probably the same person.
I really like the admonition of verse 12, because in NIV it reads, sow for yourself righteousness and reap the fruit of unfailing love, and break up your unplowed ground, for it is time to seek the Lord until he comes and showers righteousness on you.
Yeah, that's lovely. Because
it is beautiful.
But then the next verse is, because you have plowed wickedness.
Yep.
Stop doing that.
That's right.
Yeah.
But,
you reaped injustice. Yeah.
yep.
He never lets you alone too long. You start to think, oh, that's lovely. That's a lovely sentiment. And he says, but wait, this is why. Because you've been bad.
Yeah.
It's
that's good advice for any generation, though.
Yeah, for sure. Like, even I use Isaiah as an example a lot. Even Isaiah, which has a lot of sections of real strong admonition of stuff, at least there are also sections, that whole chapters that are just beautiful, love for the people, not just admonition of immorality or whatever,
Yeah.
So, but not Hosea. He doesn't give you much time to breathe. You get a verse maybe where it's like, oh, that's lovely. Oh, here we are. We're back to the.
Yeah.
I feel, the more I read it, the more I feel this book, the more I feel like you have to read this even more. This goes to what you asked earlier, Judy. You really have to read this more than a lot of books with the context in mind of what's going on. I'm learning as I go, but with it, you have to know the Assyrians are invading. You have to know that what Ephraim is, and what the position of the three tribes is, right? And then some of the other terms, and then it's sort of, this book is hard to evaluate by small pieces. You kind of have to look at it as a whole. The more I read it, we can look at this verse or that verse and it's fine, but there's kind of a theme going on of how would you summarize it? I would say because of in his case, he refers to sexual immorality because of largely sexual immorality and idol worship. Those two things are big. The people are being conquered by the Assyrians and need to go back to their ways. And it makes it even harder that one of the three tribes is especially gone away from God because they've sided with the enemy. I mean, that's your summary of this entire book in a way, right? It's nice that he gives us a few times to breathe with little nice sections like that, because that is a pretty, like that what you just said, Betty Lou, about the breaking of the fallow ground and seeking the Lord. But like I said, unlike some prophets, he doesn't give you much of that.
Yeah.
I'll continue. I'm gonna try to finish, but there's a bit more, so we'll see. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. The more I called them, the more they went from me. They kept sacrificing to the Baals and offering incense to idols. Yet it was I who taught Ephraim to walk. I took them up in my arms, but they did not know that I healed them. I led them with cords of human kindness, with bands of love. I was to them like those who left infants to their cheeks. I bent down to them and fed them. They shall return to the land of Egypt, and Assyria shall be their king, because they have refused to return to me. The sword rages in their cities, it consumes their oracle priests, and devours because of their schemes. My people are bent on turning away from me. To the Most High they call, but he does not raise them up at all. How can I give you up, Ephraim? How can I hand you over, O Israel? How can I make you like Admah? How can I treat you like Zeboim? My heart recoils within me. My compassion grows warm and tender. I will not execute my fierce anger. I will not again destroy Ephraim. For I am God and no mortal, the Holy One in your midst, and I will not come in wrath. They shall go after the Lord who roars like a lion. When he roars, his children shall come trembling from the west. They shall come trembling like birds from Egypt, and like doves from the land of Assyria, and I will return them to their home, says the Lord. Ephraim has surrounded me with lies, and the house of Israel with deceit. But Judah still walks with God and is faithful to the Holy One. Wow. So we're getting in two chapters here, we're getting some condemnation of Israel also. But at least Judah, where Jerusalem is, which is important to know, at least Judah is still following God. Is still doing the right thing. Partly because they're the furthest south and they haven't been destroyed by the invader coming from the north yet, I'm guessing. Oh, there was that mention early on, they shall return to the land of Egypt and Assyria shall be their king. I'm curious about that reference because Assyria is not from Egypt, geographically. So, okay, the verse 8. How can I give you up, Ephraim? How can I hand you over, O Israel? How can I make you like Admah? How can I treat you like Zeboim? I didn't know those other terms. Admah and Zeboim were totally destroyed cities. Wow. So that's not how can I care for you, that's how can I destroy you. That's when it talks about Ephraim and Israel. That changes that a little bit.
So they're directly connected to Ephraim?
I don't know where those cities were, where they were located. But what the prophet is saying is, you've gone so far away from me, Israel and Ephraim, that I may have to destroy you.
Not by location, just by the way they were.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Remember, at this point, most of the rest of this time, there have been a few times about immorality and idol worship with Israel, but the real one that's gone away from God was Ephraim. And now we have a couple of chapters where Israel is, I think part of this is geography, right? Because Assyria is coming from the north, and the of the three kingdoms, Israel is in the north, and then Ephraim, and then Judah. So it's maybe silly in a way, but a lot of the prophets, even the major prophets, they believed that it couldn't be destroyed, right? They believed that they were the chosen people, so it wasn't possible for them to be destroyed. So if they're being destroyed, they must have done something wrong.
Yeah.
And so what sounds like putting the cart before the horse to me, right? So you hear the prophet say, see, this is proof that you've strayed from God, that you've been immoral, that you've been praying to idols because you're being destroyed. And so Ephraim clearly sided with the enemy, but Israel is being destroyed. So clearly Israel also, Israel strayed from God because they're being destroyed. It's not an external story. They couldn't be destroyed if they were following God in their heads, right?
No.
Which I think is kind of funny theology to me, but that's not to say that's not Lutheran, but we believe that sometimes bad things happen. It has nothing to do with God, right? It's not, and God doesn't make bad things happen. And hopefully God makes something good out of those bad things. But here, if bad things happen, it's because you're being punished by God. You were morally untrue or whatever. I mean, that you're going to see that in all of the prophets, even in the major prophets and in other places. You're going to see that. Even there's hints of it in the Gospels, here and there. Jesus wasn't about that for the most part, but there's still some sort of vestiges of that you kind of read between the lines, even in the Gospels. That's just how the people think, that if bad things happen, they must have done something to cause it.
Yeah.
People still think that way in some churches today. If I have cancer, I must not have prayed hard enough or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a helpful theology.
I agree.
I'm going to continue because I'm going to push through and try to get to the end of 14. Darn it. Unless someone has questions here.
Go
That
ahead.
one part with Admon and Zeboim, right after that, it says, my heart recoils within me, my compassion grows warm and tender. I will not execute my fierce anger. I will not again destroy Ephraim. So it's almost like in verses 8 and 9, God is having an argument with God's self. I want to keep you alive, but these other cities I had to destroy. My compassion is growing. I don't want to kill you, but it's almost like it's back and forth.
Conversation with himself.
Yeah, God or the prophet.
Yeah.
Through God is saying, or God through the prophet is saying, you've done so bad. I want to save you, but really I should destroy you. But I really want to save you and be compassionate.
Yeah.
It's kind of this, yeah. Chapter 12. At least the last 3 chapters are a little shorter. Ephraim herds the wind and pursues the east wind all day long. They multiply falsehood and violence. They make a treaty with Assyria, and oil is carried to Egypt. The Lord has an indictment against Judah and will punish Jacob according to his ways and repay him according to his deeds. In the womb he tried to supplant his brother, and in his manhood he strove with God. He strove with the angel and prevailed. He wept and sought his favor. He met him at Bethel, and there he spoke with him. The Lord, the God of hosts, but the Lord is his name. But as for you, return to your God, hold fast to love and justice, and wait continually for your God. A traitor in whose hands are false balances, he loves to oppress. Ephraim has said, I am rich, I have gained wealth for myself. In all of my gain, no offense has been found in me that would be sin. I am the Lord your God from the land of Egypt. I will make you live in tents again as in the days of the appointed festival. I spoke to the prophets. It was I who multiplied visions, and through the prophets I will bring destruction. In Gilead there is iniquity. They shall surely come to nothing. In Gilgal they sacrifice bulls, so their altars shall be like stone heaps on the furrows of the field. Jacob fled to the land of Aram. There Israel served for a wife, and for a wife he guarded sheep. By a prophet the Lord brought Israel up from Egypt, and by a prophet he was guarded. Ephraim has given bitter offense, so his Lord will bring his crimes down on him and pay him back for his insults. Bethel is a reference to Jacob's abandonment of foreign gods at Bethel. A few references to Jacob here. In old Israel, instruction at Bethel had emphasized core covenantal values such as love and justice. So, the prophet's trying to get them to turn back to those things.
So has he gone back to talking to Judah instead of Israel in this section? Or are they still on Israel's transgressions?
I don't know. If I knew where Bethel was, so I know that Jacob's well is in the middle. It's in Samaria. It's in Ephraim. It's in that area, but that doesn't mean that's where Bethel is. I don't know.
Right.
I think it's less about the place and more about, in this case, it's more about rejecting false gods and turning back to God, because that's kind of the story of what happened at Bethel with Jacob.
Because I was confused when it said the Lord had an indictment against Judah, so I didn't know. I didn't know if that was a place or just the situation. I
think it might be related to less to the story of the people and more to that's a good question, and more to the older story.
Right.
Yeah. Because so far we haven't seen that. Even just the last chapter, it said Ephraim and Israel in trouble, but Judah's just fine. Right.
Yeah. So that's what had me.
Yeah. In verse 7, it says a traitor. It says traitor can be translated Canaanite, and so it's sort of a double taunt. It says a double taunt right here because it's they don't like the Canaanites, but also they're saying traitors do this, but they're calling the Canaanites traitors, sort of like not permanent residents, and calling them unfair in their dealings. That's sort of more reference to Jacob. In this whole chapter is about Jacob anyway. Oh, the title of the section is The Long History of Rebellion. Rebellion against God, right? In verses 12 to 14, the reference here says that Jacob tended sheep, but Moses tended God's human flock. Since Hosea now has Moses' rule, Jacob's descendants should heed him. So Moses was more of a shepherd to people, and he is telling the descendants of Jacob, you should be more like Moses, shepherd people, not sheep. Gilgal and Gilead here, expensive offerings of bulls were a poor substitute for covenant faithfulness. So saying, even here's a good translation to today. Just giving a lot of money to church, but not turning your heart to God you know, God doesn't look at that and say, oh, look, you gave a lot of money, then I'm going to love you more. You know, the turning your heart to God is more important than your gifts and your offerings. That's the reference in Gilgal in verse 11, and Gilgal I sacrifice bulls, kind of to say that they're trying to make up for their sins by offering bigger and more expensive gifts, sacrifices to God, rather than just turning back to God in their hearts. So, yeah, that's sort of sad in a way, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We can do it. 9 minutes.
Okay.
And if we go a little bit over, I was like, well, chapter 13 is a little longer, but yeah. When Ephraim spoke, there was trembling. He was exalted in Israel, but he incurred guilt through Baal and died. And now they keep on sinning and make a cast image for themselves, idols of silver made according to their understanding, all of them the work of artisans. Sacrifice to these, they say. People are kissing calves. Therefore they shall be like the morning mist, or like the dew that goes away early, like chaff that swirls from the threshing floor, or like smoke from a window. Yet I have been the Lord your God ever since the land of Egypt. You know no God but me, and beside me there is no Savior. It was I who fed you in the wilderness, in the land of drought. When I fed them, they were satisfied. They were satisfied, and their heart was proud. Therefore they forgot me. So I will become like a lion to them. Like a leopard, I will lurk beside the way. I will fall upon them like a bear robbed of her cubs, and I will tear open the covering of their heart. There I will devour them like a lion, as a wild animal would mangle them. I will destroy you, O Israel. Who can help you? Where now is your king that he may save you? Where in all your cities are your rulers, of whom you said, give me a king and rulers? I gave you a king in my anger, and I took him away in my wrath. Ephraim's iniquity is bound up, his sin is kept in store. The pangs of childbirth come for him, but he is an unwise son. For the proper time he does not present himself at the mouth of the womb. Shall I ransom them from the power of Sheol? Shall I redeem them from death? O death, where are your plagues? O Sheol, where is your destruction? Compassion is hidden from my eyes. Although he may flourish among rushes, the east wind shall come, a blast from the Lord, rising from the wilderness, and his fountain shall dry up. His spring shall be parched. It shall strip his treasury of every precious thing. Samaria shall bear her guilt, because she has rebelled against her God. They shall fall by the sword, their little ones shall be dashed in pieces, and their pregnant women ripped open. Wow.
Yeah.
Ouch.
And of course, the second half of verse 14 is echoed again in 1 Corinthians chapter 15.
Oh, death, where is your sting? Yeah, I thought that too. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I think it's what I'm wondering is, I agree with you, but I think Paul is making it something slightly different. Something very different, I guess I should say.
Yes, definitely.
Because this is more of a condemnation of the people rather than pointing to the resurrection.
Yeah.
As Paul is doing.
Yeah.
I think Paul might be referencing this verse.
Well, there's no doubt about what he was totally knowledgeable about.
Right.
All of the scriptures that because there was no New Testament at that time.
Right.
And so all of his scripture was from what we call the Old Testament. So that if he quotes something from the Old Testament and then brings it up to date according to the light that Christ brought to us, it is not surprising.
Right. You know, Paul was a good Jew, right? So he knew
Absolutely.
he knew his scripture, and and he quoted scripture. I don't know that this is a quote, but it's more like a parallel. He knew this verse and he used the verse
Yes.
in a parallel way. I think what's being said is kind of a little bit different, probably, but
Mhm.
but the sort of poetic nature of it is sort of reflected for sure.
Definitely.
I
Well,
wonder-
and
I wonder if
we should always remember too that all of the apostles were Jewish,
right. Sure.
as well as Jesus himself.
It actually says here, so, O death, where are your plagues? O Sheol, where is your destruction? The Hebrew may entail a divine summons to effect punishment. O death, bring on your plagues. O grave, bring on your destruction. Alternatively, the sense may be one of hope from 1 Corinthians. So it actually, my Bible actually references that.
Yeah.
There, I guess it basically it's saying it's two very different ways to read that.
Yes.
One is death, how come you haven't come to destroy the people? And then, oh death, where's your sting? Oh death, how come you were unable to conquer
If we-
Jesus? It's the same words in a way, but it's an entirely different intention,
Yep,
right?
definitely.
Which is interesting, right? It doesn't sound like, it doesn't look like he's quoting directly, but it's a similar thought. The words are similar, but they're used very differently.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's like here death is being taunted in a way, like death, how come you haven't come to destroy the people? Whereas in the 1 Corinthians is death, look, you were unable of being, you were conquered by Jesus.
Mhm.
It's the same words in a way, but it's very different kind of process.
Okay. All right.
I love the passages, so verse 3, but it's right after it's talking about the people keep on sinning and worshiping idols, and then this image, which I think is actually it's sad in a way, but it's also kind of a beautiful image. Therefore they shall be like the morning mist, or like the dew that goes away early, like chaff that swirls on the threshing floor, like smoke from a window. It's sort of, they can't hold on to God because God is going to sort of dissipate and go away from them. But a poetic way of saying that, it's kind of pretty, despite the fact it's kind of sad.
Mhm.
At least it puts it into words that they understand, probably.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if you read just verse 3 out of context, you'd be like, oh, how beautiful.
Mhm.
But what it's really saying is that's how God's love is going to be for the people. It's gonna dissipate and go away. Like, oh, right. Okay. At the very end of that chapter, we have, that, gosh, I said one of the worst verses in all of Scripture is in the Psalms when it says, "He shall dash your children against the rocks."
Mhm. Mhm.
This is pretty close. This is
Yeah.
pretty bad. My
Yeah.
goodness, verse 16. Wow. I don't even want to say it again. Ooh. Their little ones shall be dashed in pieces and their pregnant women ripped open.
Yeah.
Honestly, there's a lot of brutal verses in Scripture, but that's got to be
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
one of the worst. And that's referring to Samaria. The Samaria and Ephraim, I think, are sort of parallel in a way, because the same land. It's that area which is rebelling against God and siding with the Assyrians. And then we have chapter 14. Return, O Israel, to the Lord your God, for you have stumbled because of your iniquity. Take words with you and return to the Lord. Say to him, take away all guilt. Accept that which is good, and we will offer the fruit of our lips. Assyria shall not save us. We will not ride upon horses. We will say no more our God to the work of our hands. In you the orphan finds mercy. I will heal their disloyalty. I will love them freely, for my anger is turned from them. I will be like the dew to Israel. He shall blossom like the lily. He shall strike root like the forest of Lebanon. His shoots shall spread out. His beauty shall be like the olive tree, and his fragrance like that of Lebanon. They shall again live beneath my shadow. They shall flourish as a garden. They shall blossom like the vine. Their fragrance shall be like the wine of Lebanon. O Ephraim, what have I to do with idols? It is I who answer and look after you. I am like an evergreen cypress. Your faithfulness comes from me. Those who are wise understand these things. Those who are discerning know them. For the ways of the Lord are right, and the upright walk in them, but transgressors stumble in them. Wow. The first whole chapter that's just sort of, I love my people.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a
I'm
little,
glad the book ends that way because there are so many awful parts in it.
right, for sure. I mean, it's got little moments, but for the most part, it's a pretty strong condemnation of the people.
Yeah.
It almost feels like the prophet said, well, I can't leave them. I got to be nice to them. I got to have them still feel okay about themselves at the end of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it almost feels like an afterthought a little bit. But good, you're right. I'm glad, because it would be hard to finish this. Imagine if this book ended at the end of chapter 13 and their pregnant women ripped open.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah.
But you know that the verse 4 and 5, I will heal them, be like the dew. They will take root and spread out. I mean, that's language we've seen in other places. Blossom like the vine, flourish as a garden. What lovely imagery after all of that
Yes.
we've read
Yes.
earlier in the prophet, right?
Yeah.
The orphan finds mercy. It's lovely. It says in my my notes, the last for verse 9, conclusion, the style of wisdom writings such as Proverbs and Psalm 1. You see that kind of phrase, those who are wise understand these things, that those that are discerning know them. That sort of line is in those places. It's in traditional wisdom literature, which Hosea is not, but it's a good reminder that there's similar kinds of sentiment in the wisdom literature about if you stray from the God, there's going to be consequence, but wise, the wise, listen to my voice and follow my commands, kind of language. So it's interesting that it sort of brings sort of an echo of wisdom literature at the end. Okay. Well, we're going to go back to short prophets. The next prophet is only 3 chapters, Joel. Amos, I don't think is super long. So, and then I think we might. I'm not sure. Yeah, we finished with Jonah, which is kind of fun if you think about it. Because we know the story of Jonah. Well, let me say this. We think we know the story of Jonah.
Yeah.
Oh, we have Obadiah and Jonah.
Oh, Obadiah. Did I miss Obadiah in there?
Yeah, Obadiah's in there, and then Jonah.
Obadiah is only 1 chapter. That's why. Yeah.
Yep.
Pretty short.
And
But and then we started with Micah when we did this whole thing.
Yes.
Months ago.
So we have
that
Joel
will be
and Amos.
Joel, Amos.
My favorite.
Yep. So.
Then Obadiah and
then Jonah.
And Jonah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, Jonah is one of those stories that we think we know, but Jonah is actually there's some layers of Jonah that I don't know that everybody appreciates.
What we know about Jonah is what we learned in Sunday school when we were children.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. There it's yeah, Jonah's a very interesting book. Like our cartoons. They made a VeggieTales movie on Jonah, which is cute, but some of the important details are sort of left out.
Yeah.
Of course, you have the fish, and of course, you have the you have the telling the people to turn from their wicked ways, but there's a lot more detail in there. That's interesting. So there's a lot of sort of subtle stuff in there, especially how I think the book of Jonah. I don't know why I'm talking about this now, but it's just in my head. I think the book of Jonah is ironically more about, it's supposed to be about turning the people in the city from their evil ways, but really it's about Jonah's own transformation and conversion. So that makes it, and that's much more evident when you read the book, that it's the people are the fact that the people do eventually turn back to God is almost an afterthought to Jonah's own spiritual journey, which is, I think, that kind of the neat thing about the book that we sort of miss sometimes. So, all right, well, thank you all. I'm going to stop recording.